live on Facebook right now. You can tell everybody's kind of geographically separated. Both the commander and I are in Pocatello, Idaho. We're kind of observing Delta Company's drill weekend, their distance drill weekend. And we're walking in different locations, making sure that we can maintain our constant communication and a cell phone connection. So kind of with last time when we went live for live Q&A, we talked specifically about some of the COVID-19 concerns that parents and soldiers had. We talked about a way forward 30 to 45 days into the future with the training bases we're anticipating, ship dates, ship concerns, and then we answered some very specific questions when it came to MOS availability, paths in the National Guard, money that you can get. So really, that's what we're going to do. We are going to open this up to the soldiers in each one of the companies that are currently undergoing a drill weekend training. And then, if your families are on, and we hope they are, and they've got specific questions they want to ask, then let's get them answered. So I'll turn it over here to the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brady Johnson. Go ahead, sir.
Well, welcome everybody again to our virtual drill. Like I said, echoing what the Sergeant Major just said, I hope your families are on. I hope that parents and other significant others are here to ask us questions just like you are. We can report a lot of positive things out there news-wise. The U.S. Army and training bases have moved to 100% shipping again. So I know that there's been a lot of concern about shipping dates as of the 18th of May that will have changed and gotten us back into 100% shipping and outside of having to renegotiate contracts for shipping windows. So that's a really positive move. The other indication that gives us is that they have everything under control at training bases regarding the spread of COVID-19. What I mean by that is that they still have a waiting period and they still have a time in order to ensure that we're keeping all of our basic trainees as safe as possible. They're still going through a very extensive screening process before they start the training. And then they go into the training when they know that they have a clean group of individuals. So that's great news. We're not having to deal with challenges along those lines right now. And so, with that, Sergeant Slaughter, have you seen any questions coming in yet from the Facebook? Well, actually, before we get to questions, I want to introduce CW3 Ben Jensen and Second Lieutenant Brooke Berard. They work in our Office of Strength Management, Officer Strength Management portion of the Recruiting and Retention Battalion. And their the specific things they work with is dealing with helping those who choose to go officer or warrant officer in the organization, making that transition. I know most of you have chosen to join the units and stay in the enlisted realm, but as time goes on, these two individuals you may want to talk with them a few years down the road. But with that, let me turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Berard. I'm Mrs. Chief Jensen. So I handle all officer sessions, and he deals with specialty sessions and warrant officers. So you would go to become an officer in our organization. Traditionally, is your first step is you meet with a recruiter and enlist and attend basic training. You're going to enlist as a 09 Sierra candidate. After you complete basic training, then you're going to start Officer Candidate School, which is a 4-phase school that starts in January. This school normally takes 18 months and you commission the following September. Through that process, you'll select your branch. We have 11 branches here in the state of Idaho out of the 14 that you can branch into in the Army. After you commission as an officer, then you attend Basic Officer Leaders Course, also known as BOLIC, and that completes your path on becoming an officer in our organization.
Hey, Chief Jensen here. If you're looking at pursuing the warrant officer route, typically you will spend 5 to 8 years in our enlisted ranks and become a subject matter expert in your field. At that time, if the unit selects you to become a warrant officer, you give me a call and we'll go through that process.
Okay, so we introduced Chief Jensen, Lieutenant Berard, Commander and I are on. So just kind of give you a little back brief, kind of where we're sitting at as a state. and kind of the, the direction we're going with shipping. So as it stands right now, we are 100% open on shipping in the state of Idaho. So we have not had any MEPS restrictions. Nothing is limiting our people from shipping out. There was a period of time prior to obviously this drill weekend for a couple of weeks where we were limited down to 50% shipping. That is not the case now. We are 100% go at this station. So when you get to this point and you've raised your right hand and you are in your RSP companies, we're getting a lot of questions that are popping up. Hey, what does basic look like? And I think the last time that we went through this discussion, we talked very specifically about TRADOC, Training and Doctrine Command, which is the people that run basic training sites. They were considering 2-week quarantine, then an 8-week basic combat training. So as you know, you raised your right hand, and when the MEPS GCs and your recruiter briefed you, he told you, hey, it's a 10-week basic training. Well, what they've done is they've condensed their training down into an 8-week actual training cycle, but they're preempting it with a 14-day quarantine. So you're going to, when you're 2 weeks out from shipping, your recruiting and retention NCO and the RSP NCO are going to reach out to you. They're going to contact you, and they're going to start the paperwork that tracks daily exactly how you're feeling. And they're going to ask you questions like, have you been around anybody that's been in contact with COVID-19? Is there any members of your family that are immediately quarantined? So they're going to ask you these direct questions to kind of see the feasibility and availability for your shipping. So they ask you these questions. They're going to set up forms, kind of prep the battlefield for you, make sure that everything's good when you go to MEPS. Fast forward 2 weeks, your RSP NCO or your recruiting retention NCO is going to pick you up. They're going to drive you to MEPS. You're going to go through the MEPS process, and we'll ship you. We'll get you on a plane. We'll get you off to whatever basic training site you're going to, and then you will start a 14-day quarantine period there. Okay. At the end of that 14-day quarantine period, you immediately go into 8 weeks of basic combat training. Okay. And it's going to be quick, fast, and in a hurry. 8 weeks is going to go like a flash. You're not even going to be able to tell that you're there, right? And I'm totally being facetious. It's probably going to suck. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of push-ups, but it is what it is, right? We're training you to be a soldier. So at the end of that, you are going to ship to advanced individual training for the MOS that you chose, but you will be shipping on time. So it's pretty important that, and we want to say that again, we've had a lot of questions about, hey, will I be delayed going to AIT? No, you will not. As you can tell that they've adjusted their basic combat training schedule to make up for that. So there is no delays and no changes to your AIT schedule. So you will go, and when you leave your basic combat training site, let's say you're going to another base and they transport you, you do not enter another quarantine period, because TRADOC is to the point where once you've entered one quarantine period, whether they put you on a transport or you get transported to the airport, et cetera, you don't have to enter another quarantine period. So it's all good. You'll get to your AIT and you'll start your training. So that's kind of what shipping look like, and there's no restrictions. So that's kind of where we're at. So let me take a look at some of the questions that have popped up here. Okay, so, and I'm going to turn this one over to both Lieutenant Berard and Chief Jensen. The direct question is, so overall, how long is the process total, start to finish, with becoming an officer? And they're looking for the months. How long in months?
So specifically, becoming an officer, there's different paths to get you there. So non-prior service individual talking to a recruiter. First, they have to enlist and attend basic training. Now, the state OCS program starts every January. So they'll be drilling with RSP upon completion of basic training. Depend on when they enlist and go to basic, there will be a varying lag time between basic training and starting OCS. So you'll start OCS in January. That's when zero phase kicks off, and you'll commission September of the following year. So the exact months, it would depend on when they went to basic training.
Okay, roger that. So the next question that popped up says, hey, Chief, do you have to be an officer to fly?
You have to be an officer or a warrant officer to be on the controls. Both are great options for our young leaders. Now, if you have a 4-year degree and you're interested more in leadership, you go the opposite route, and we can get you prepped for the flight board that route. Or if you have not finished your 4-year degree and college isn't your thing and the warrant officer life is for you, then you can come see me and put together your flight packet and send you down the warrant route.
Okay. And he does. Every time I turn around, he's got a line outside of his door. Both him and Lieutenant Berard do, turning our young, talented, future enlisted NCOs into officers. It's quite disheartening. So I got a direct question here. What will we be doing for the 2-week quarantine period? So I'm glad you asked that question. So what's going to happen is that you're going to get off the plane, and there's going to be a bus that shows up, and they're going to be showing a movie on the bus. It's probably some movie that is, out in the movie theaters currently. They're going to give you a bag of goodies. There'll probably be some Cheetos and maybe some pop, and they're going to hold your hand, and you're going to go to basic combat training, and all the drill sergeants are going to say really positive, supportive things. You're going to get off the bus. You're going to get to sleep in every day until 10. I think you're done training around 2:15 in the afternoon. Movies every weekend. So I really think the 2-week quarantine period is going to be pretty chill. That's not true. So you're going to be doing push-ups. You're going to get up early. They're going to prep you for basic combat training. Just because they're quarantining you does not mean that you can't perform duties and tasks. So the only thing that they're doing is making sure that during this quarantine period that you maintain the socially acceptable distances that are kind of governed by the White House and the current pandemic guidelines. So, but you'll be training, you'll be running, you'll be doing push-ups, you'll be eating Army food, you'll be taking direct instruction from Army NCOs. And it's there to prepare you for your 8 weeks of basic combat training. Okay, so somebody asked, I just got back from 19 kilo OSET and my brother is still there. There was talk about holding him there. Do we know anything? So yeah, we do. And I'll answer this question. So if you belong to a state guard, so if you are a soldier attending a basic combat training for the state guard, and you complete that training, then they basically they end your service and they put you on a plane and they fly you back to your home state. If you're the state guard, if you're active duty, there's a potential for them to keep you there for an undisclosed time until either training starts or your duty base, wherever that assignment is, picks you up. So, but you will be coming home. Now, if you're split up, meaning if you're a junior and you get on a plane and you go to training and that training is complete, there is a required timeline that you have to follow so that you meet the start of your final education year. So you go as a junior, you do a split up, you go to training, you come back. We have to have you back by a certain time so you can attend that senior year of training. Okay, so this is a question for the commander. The question was asked, if you have a master's degree, is there any training that is not required? So basically, if you have a master's degree, will that get you out of any specific training?
Yes and no. If it's in a specialty area, like medical, JAG, dentistry, then that is a potential opportunity for you to commission on a very short schedule, and that gets you into those fields. For the rest of the force, no, you still have to go through the same, you're gonna have to go through a commissioning source. So if it's RTC, well, it won't be RTC if you already have your degrees. It'll have to be like OCS type program. You'll have to go through Lieutenant Berard. But as far as enlisting and going through, it will help you come in as a much higher rank. You'll come in as a specialty C4, but it doesn't preclude you from going through any other kind of training. Even, and I'll kick this over to Chief Jensen and Lieutenant Berard in just a second. But even if you have your pilot's license, you're still going to go through the Army pilot training, because we have our way of doing it. We have our procedures of doing it. So you may have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in something. The Army still has specific ways that they fold you into how they do things. So I'm going to kick it over to those two now, because that's really an officer route type question. And so go ahead, Chief, and Lieutenant Berard, take that one over for a minute.
Absolutely, sir. You knocked it out of the park. Outside of your specialty branches, AMAD, Chaplain, and JAG, if you're in one of those specialties and you already have a skill that the Army needs, that's when you would qualify for the direct commission. But beyond that, you would still need a commissioning source, just like you said, sir.
Okay, the next question. Are they allowing parents to attend graduation? The short answer is no. They're doing a lot of virtual graduations right now. And it's not because they don't want your parents to see you. They know how important that is. The reason being is these training bases that we ship you to, these are really, because they've been under quarantine, they're secure locations. It's probably the closest thing to the securest location that you can attend as far as this pandemic is concerned, because everybody on base, right? Everybody, all the drill sergeants, all the training NCOs, every building you're going to go into is cleaned daily on a schedule. And there's really no incidents of coronavirus on this training base. And that's how they get away with, hey, 14-day quarantine. And then they fire you out the end of the barrel directly into training. So, so the short answer is no, they can't allow your parents to come down because then they'd have to put your parents in 14-day quarantine period as well. So that was a good question. Let me see. During the 14 days of quarantine, can I use computer or cell phone? So they're wrapping up your reception time with the 14-day quarantine period. So when you go down range, there's going to be set times during reception that you're going to be allowed to use your phone. And I don't know if you've ever been on any of these training base Facebook pages, but we implore you to go follow those training book Facebook pages, because you're going to get a lot of your questions answered there. But one of the things that you'll see is that you'll see the soldiers sitting around, and there's 180 soldiers vying for 19 outlets to charge their phone. So it is what it is, right? You're there to learn how to be a soldier, not do Facebook status updates, and right. So very limited amount of cell phone access. Computer access, probably not at all. So yeah, if you got to get on the gram, if you got a couple of real hot selfies you want to take in your new military uniform, you might get away with that, but I wouldn't plan on it. Okay. Next question. Because ship-off dates are now getting back to normal, are Renos eligible for soldiers that want an earlier ship date? So the direct answer on that one's going to be no. They're not doing earlier ship date renegotiations until they have some dead space for these soldiers. What do I mean by that? Here in Idaho, we've been very lucky. The case number has been very low. As you can tell, we're going through phased openings. Things are looking good. You can probably walk into a restaurant here in the next couple of weeks and get yourself that delicious steak you've been dying to have for the last 2 months. Other places in the nation are not that way. Places like New York, a lot of the East Coast, California, Washington, it is still very real, and things are not opening up at speed. And because of that, these larger states are constantly canceling ship dates. And the benefit is that when they cancel these ship dates, they allow that state to renegotiate somebody that was previously canceled that has now been through a quarantine and is good to go. So until we see a dramatic dip in the amount of cases in a lot of the larger states on the East and West Coast, then those renegotiations, we won't be able to vie for earlier renegotiations. But that being said, we are one of the states that followed the rules and the regulations of this quarantine very thoroughly, and that gives us a lot of leeway with the National Guard Bureau. So if you are an RSP warrior that is looking for an earlier renegotiation, I would tell you, reach out to your RSP NCO and reach out to your recruiting and retention NCO and have them send an email and ask the question, because we'll get you a direct answer. Okay. Okay. Next question. This is going to go over to Chief and the LT. Generally, how long is aviation Bullock?
So aviation Bullock flight school, all rolled into one. There's multiple courses back to back. We're just going to call it flight school right now. I would say plan for 18 months to be down at Fort Rucker. And I say plan for 18 months because, like I said, multiple courses back to back. It's not unstandard to have a break between classes where you're in a hold period. You're getting paid to study, do some PT, and go down to the Florida coast and enjoy some fishing. But depending on when you catch those bubbles and how long they are, around 18 months to come back as a pilot.
Nice. Okay. I hope that answers your question directly. We've got one here. What about split ops soldiers heading straight to AIT? Not sure exactly what you're asking there, but if your question is there going to be a quarantine period heading straight to AIT? The answer is yes. They've built that into the schedule. Typically, you have somewhere between a 4 and 10 day reception timeline when you go to AIT as a split op, and depending on when that training is potentially going to start, is kind of how long that time at reception lasts. So what they've done is they've built the maximum amount of time into the reception, and then they've told the AIT training dates to start 2 or 3 days later. So your graduation date for AIT has not changed. They're going to adjust the timeline up front, and they're just going to cram more training into that. So, instead of sleeping in until 10, maybe you'll get to sleep in until 9. So. Okay, there was a comment on here. When I graduated, they were not allowing anyone in the forts. I'm not sure what fort you were talking about. If you've got a question, type it in there again. We'll get it answered for you. I'm not sure how to do that one. Okay. So, okay, here's a question. And they're coming in. A bunch of them are coming in. So the question is, so we have the option to attend OCS right after basic combat training. And that was a question. So I want to turn that over to Commander. We'll start with you.
Yes and no. Again, it depends on what path you've chosen. If you've enlisted as, let's say, a 19 kilo, you're going to go to AIT as a 19 kilo. You're going to come back to the state and you're going to start drilling with your regular unit. And that's when you have to bring up the conversation with either Lieutenant Berard or Chief regarding this. Now, OCS doesn't happen unless you have a 4-year degree. And you can't just jump into that program immediately. Actually, there's a limitation. It used to be 90 credits. I'm going to stop talking and kick it back over to them again and have them.
Sir, you were on the right track. So to start OCS, you need to have 90 credits towards your degree plan, towards your 4-year degree. So it just depends on how you want to time it, really. So let's say that you enlist in February and you go to basic training in March. You're going to come back around the beginning of the summer, and from the beginning of the summer until the following January, you're going to drill back at your RSP company. Let's say you time it, and then you start OCS in January. Let's say you time it differently and you enlist in August and you go to basic training in September. Then at that point, pretty much the second you graduate from basic training, when you come back to the state, you're not going to have that holdover time, and you're just going to start OCS right away in January. So it just depends on when you enlist and how many months are between when you come home from basic training and January when OCS starts.
But again, that's all dependent upon, you have to have that 90 credits or a degree. If you've got 0, you're either going to have to talk to them about ROTC or go spend time in a unit, go to college, use your GI Bill benefits and the other state benefits. There's a bunch of different paths that can be taken, and get through basic training, get through AIT, come back, and we'll help you make those decisions.
Okay, 2 questions. The first one, when flying to basic training, do you recommend sleeping? The answer is yes, absolutely. Sleep on the way to basic training because that's likely the most sleep that you're going to get for about 10 weeks. Okay, next question. Does ROTC replace OCS? You guys want to answer this one?
Yeah, we can answer this one. So ROTC and OCS are very similar, but they're not the same. What they have in common is they're both commissioning sources. So ROTC, the difference is while you're in college, you would take ROTC classes throughout your college degree. You contract as a cadet, and when you graduate with your bachelor's degree, you also commission up as an officer. OCS is different because you can start OCS during college or after college, but it's not affiliated directly with your college. We're good with that? See if that answered that question.
Oh yeah, it answered it. Okay. Next question. Can you take the SIFT and get your flight physical before going to basic?
Yes. So typically in Idaho, we will not give a full flight physical until an individual has been selected by the board. They'll do an initial flight pre-screening with our flight doc. And then if they're selected, then we'll schedule them for the full-blown flight physical. And yes, anybody can take the SIFT. If they're not in, the recruiter can schedule them for the SIFT at MEPS. And if it's a current serving guardsman, we can set them up to take the SIFT at the Education Center here on Gowan.
Okay, next question. Soldier goes to basic, goes to AIT and returns. When do you recommend starting the packet process for ROTC or OCS?
So the packet process through ROTC is done entirely by the ROTC department at your local university. If you're unsure of who to talk to down at the university, I can help arrange a meeting with the RU, which will be your ROTC operations officer, to see if you're a good fit for that. And that's going to be for soldiers that don't have any college or just starting college. So that would be the path for you. Now, let's say that you're like me and you had a few years into college, then we would start talking about OCS. And so as soon as you come back from AIT, I mean, you can reach out to Chief Jensen and I whenever you'd like, and we can help you with either option.
I was going to comment on that a little bit too. So my history was 11 years as an enlisted man before I got my degree. So I came to the officer side of the house after 11 years in the system. So there is a benefit to staying enlisted for a short period of time, if that's within your schedule and that fits, because it gives you experience with the weapon systems and with the units. That does help later on when you transition over to become an officer or an officer. But that's a case-by-case thing that you're going to have to judge individually. There's a huge, like I said, there's a huge benefit even to 1 or 2 years coming out of basic training in AIT and doing that before you transition over. And the great thing about the officer program is that if you come after 2 years of doing enlisted time and you've done a year of college, you can roll into ROTC. You can be going to school, staying an enlisted person, and then all of a sudden be an OCS. There's all kinds of ways to become an officer, and there's all kinds of timelines, and those always change, but they're based 100% upon your situation and where you are.
All right. We had 4 or 5 questions come in. So the first one, any info on flight medic school? I'm not a pilot. I can't fly.
To be a flight medic. So we do have a medevac company here in Idaho. Now, to be a flight medic, you would enlist as a 68 Whiskey combat medic. And then we have a board, much like the flight board, where all the state 68 Whiskeys that are interested in going to aviation and being a flight medic will board for it just like boarding for a pilot.
Okay. When you become an officer, do you sign a new contract and get a set number of years of service?
You will sign a new contract, except as an officer, we don't have a term of our commission, if you will. You're a commissioned officer until you resign your commission. Certain schools that you attend can come with a service obligation, which requires a number of years in a drilling status in the Guard, but that's dependent on the school. As an officer, you hold your commission until you resign it.
That being said, if you enlist as a 09 Sierra, so you start out, you haven't been to basic training, and you enlist specifically on the officer course, then it's a 6x2 contract.
And then there's a mandatory removal date in MRD that occurs with officers. There's also an up or out situation that officers find themselves in. The enlisted side of the house, you can pretty much be here forever and at many different ranks on the enlisted side of the house. With an officer, you can only go so far before they'll remove you from the program. They'll forcibly remove you or transfer you to the Army Reserves because it's kind of an up or out. So if you don't progress at a certain pace, you could find yourself being moved. If you don't go to schools, and there's continuing education that goes with both sides of this, but as an officer, those are longer and they get more and more complicated as you go. And so those schools are benchmarks that you have to meet, commands that you have to be in. There's a whole lot of key things throughout your career. And we do have people who go officer and then they revert back to enlisted because they hit some of those roadblocks, but they want to do a 20 or 30 year service. So they'll revert back. It's more restrictive for officers, and the timelines there are some timelines that you can be moved out of the way.
Okay, next question. When I went to training, I entered as an E1, but came back as an E2, but I didn't get the rank up there. Do I rank up with my unit, question mark? No, you ranked up because your RSP NCO was on top of it. So basically what happened was, is you joined, came in as an E1, and E1 through E4, there's a lot of time and service, time and grade requirements that have to be hit, but your RSP NCO is looking at your training packet on a weekly basis. And even while you're downrange at school, he's looking at the dates. And when you get to a certain date, it's time for you to be an E2, and he ranks you up. And we do that because that's more money in your pocket. The regulation says you're supposed to be promoted. It's time and grade, time and service. There's nothing holding you back. And, you know, if you go downrange to basic training and you make $1,100 while you're at basic or whatever the rate is now, you know, $1,500 looks definitely a lot better than $1,100. So that's just your RSP NCO doing what he's supposed to be doing, and that's taking care of you. So next question. Will the packet that gets sent home to family when you get to basic combat training have your graduation dates for BCT and AIT on it? 9 times out of 10, no, they won't. What does get sent home is it's kind of your company commander and your company first sergeant's welcome letter with details on how to find you for graduation. There'll be a map on it, stuff like that. And it'll tell you right in this letter, hey, go to this Facebook page or send an email to this, you know, email address for graduation details after a set date. And the reason they do that is you go down range and graduation's not guaranteed. You know, you have to perform. This is a full-time employment opportunity that you're going to when you go to your TRADOC training base, and for 10 weeks, you're there sun up to sundown, and you have to perform. You have to perform to a set standard, and sometimes people don't perform to a set standard. So usually about week 6.5 is when they're going to give you the information for graduation. Now, because of the pandemic, things have changed. Right now, parents are not authorized to go to the training bases to watch graduation. So you will get a letter from your RSP warrior, and RSP warriors, you will be able to send your first letter home to your parents within 72 hours, you being at the reception site, but it most likely won't have graduation information on it. It'll just be kind of a form letter that talks about the steps that they're taking for, the current restrictions during the pandemic. So I hope that answers your question. Next question, going 68 whiskey. If I get my paramedic EMT prior to AIT, does that reduce my training time at AIT? Okay, so the short answer is no. If you've already enlisted and you've picked 68 whiskey, and you're in that ship window, and then you get your paramedic EMT prior to that, there's pretty much nothing you're going to be able to do to shorten the amount of training time. Now, if you're currently an EMT paramedic and you have all the documentation for that, then I suggest that you reach out to your recruiting and retention NCO, located in many of the locations in this great state that we currently reside in, and talk to them about the CAS program, Civilian Acquired Skills Program. 68 Whiskey is one of those that will give you some sort of advanced credit and maybe reduce the amount of time that you have to go to AIT. And this information is old because I'm old, but we're talking about taking a 16-week EMT course and cutting the first 4.5 to 6.5 weeks out of it for AIT. That's kind of what it was about 3.5, 4 years ago. But I implore you to reach out to your recruiting and retention NCO. It's written right in the regulation. They'll get you a direct answer for that. What are the requirements for mountaineering school? Who cares? Next question. Messing with you. Okay. Mountaineering school. Well, the number one thing that you have to do is you actually have to pick an MOS that authorizes mountaineering school. Okay. So the first requirement that you're going to have to meet for mountaineering school is you're going to have to take one of those dirt eater jobs, one of those like 11 series jobs. And you're going to have to go and be a success at that. Okay. Those jobs they're hard. Okay. It's picking up a rifle. It's learning how to do soldier things. It is strenuous. Physical activity is intense. If you go downrange to basic training in AIT and you come back as a fully qualified dirt eater, okay, that'd be an 11 series, then come and see your recruiting and retention NCO, or come to the recruiting battalion's headquarters and we'll have a printout for you of all the requirements to do mountaineering. Okay. As a 68 whiskey, would transitioning to flight medic assist with being selected for warrant officer pilots program in the future?
It would, so when I'm answering questions like that, it always helps when you enlist and serve in the aviation battalion, because you're getting the face time with the individuals that'll be sitting on the flight board. However, it's not a requirement. Every year we have a flight board and we select soldiers from all the units throughout the state. So yes, it'll get you exposure to aviation. You'll meet key leadership that will be sitting on the flight board. So if you do that route, just remember every drill weekend's a job interview. And yeah, show up and excel, and it would help, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. What are the requirements for Ranger school? Next one. Okay. So kind of like mountaineering school, right? You got to be HUA. That's the first one. And you got to volunteer for everything. You got to run faster than everybody. You got to be smarter than everybody. You got to be stronger than everybody. So you got to be that guy. In all seriousness, when it comes to these specialty schools, here's what you need to keep in mind, okay? Mountaineering warfare, Ranger school, United States military is looking for the best of the best to do this job. Because at the end of the day, these aren't It's nothing like you watch in the video games, okay? When these people go and they go to these schools, it's because that skill set is going to be needed in the future. There's going to be faraway places and faraway lands that you're going to need to do mountaineering warfare, that you're going to need to do ranger school, and people are going to be relying on you, okay? They're going to be relying on you to bring them home or come and get them out of harm's way. So there's obviously a lot of pre-testing that goes on in this, but you got to be the best. You've got to be a natural leader. Your PT has to be better than all of those guys standing next to you. You got to be able to think on your feet. It's just how it is. So, you know, and I'll take this right here. So Staff Sergeant Gango, for anybody in the local area, answered it dead on. It says mountaineering warfare is a school that is given by your unit. Only top qualified soldiers will go after various pre-testing. His advice, be a good soldier, pass your PT and beyond, train others and be a leader. That's it. Got to be the best of the best. Okay, this is a good question. Is your MOS locked in, or is it possible to change before you go to AIT? Okay, so really, I think two answers there. Is it possible to change, like, hey, you're having like buyer's remorse and you want a different MOS? The answer is no, you can't really change your MOS. Okay. Now, if you pick an MOS and you go down range, can it be changed when you're going to basic training in AIT? In the Idaho Army National Guard, it cannot. So you get what you signed on the dotted line for.
However, at the end of all that, you get into a unit and there are opportunities constantly once you get into an operational unit where they do have opportunities and they ask people to switch over and do a different thing, and or you do your first 6-year enlistment term and then you start talking to the NCOs and the officers that are running those units. But that's down the road, and your focus needs to be get through the one you signed up to do, and get through where you are now. And it doesn't hurt to have more than one skill set later on in your career, but focus on the skill sets you have now, or the skill sets you signed up for now. Get through the training, because that's the big thing, is you got to get through what is in front of you first while you're making plans for the future.
Okay. And then this question came in. After graduating ROTC, do you then have to attend the full officer candidate school?
So no, so think of like you have your commissioning source, which is this level, and that can be officer candidate school or ROTC. No matter who commissions you, your next step is going to be to go to basic officer leaders course. So everyone goes to that next point of it. So everyone attends BOLIC, which is basically an officer version of AIT. That's your specialized training in your branch. So you either go to ROTC or you go to OCS, but everyone goes to BOLIC.
Okay, excellent answer. We have a direct question in there, something about an employer issue for somebody that has been slated to go to basic training in AIT. And there's a lot of people answering that question, a lot of professional answers, and I appreciate that. We've got an organization called Employee Support for Guard or Reserve, and then there's a few other outreach programs on Gowan Field that can assist you. So if you're having a hard time with your employer and you're going to basic training in AIT, and they need to be informed of your status and your rights as a soldier, I would say the first step is to reach out to your recruiting and retention NCO, or if you're in an RSP program and you joined, then reach out to your RSP NCO, and they will get you all the information you need for that. I'm hoping that answers your question. Again, there's a lot of information that's going on in there, so it would just be easiest if you pick up the phone and call your RSP NCO, your recruiting and retention NCO, and ask them directly the question, and they will put you in contact with the right people on Gowan Field to get that question answered for you. And it looks like I come to the end of the questions. Not trying to cut anybody off, but we're sitting at about 50 minutes right now, and I haven't seen a new question for about 6 minutes. So any last minute thoughts, Chief Lieutenant Berard?
No, I just would recommend that anybody that has additional questions, do not hesitate to reach out to any of the people streaming now. Whoever you feel most comfortable taking your questions to, will work as a team and get you the answers. And yeah, help you down your path to serve in the Idaho Army National Guard.
So as you can see in the background, like right above me, you see all of our social media contact information is listed there. And then you're actually watching this on Facebook, our Facebook page, right? So send us a message, a direct message to any one of these. Just like the chief said, we'll get your questions answered. You don't have to have our phone number. You don't have to come in and see us, but we will answer your question. And if we can't answer the question, we will get you to your recruiting and retention NCO or the NCO in your RSP company that can. So, sir.
Yeah, I just want to take the time again to express, our thanks to you and your families for the option or for the decision to serve both the state of Idaho and the United States as a whole. As we can see, the National Guard is so critical to local operations, especially when it comes to things like we're dealing with right now. And I know Midwestern states, there's other states that deal with emergencies and challenges. The Intermountain West has quite a few less problems. So the need for hurricane response and for floods and fires and other things, it's a real thing. And your desire to serve, that says a lot about who you are, and it says a lot about the future that you're looking forward to and that you're planning for. And so thanks for being a part of our team. Weather the storm with this on the COVID-19, get to your basic training sites, do well there, come back and then continue to contribute to your families, your neighbors, your communities, and it'll be a rewarding experience for you. So again, thank you.
Okay, my final thoughts here before we sign off. We've had a lot of questions, a lot of OSM questions, flight medic, 68 whiskey, specialty schools. Here's what you need to remember. You want to make yourself the obvious choice to get selected for all those. So your performance, daily performance as a soldier matters. Okay, it's not just about your PT test. It's not just about how good your uniform looks. But what kind of soldier are you day to day is going to decide if you get selected for these specialty schools. So do the best that you can. And it starts in basic combat training. You're being evaluated. Those evaluations come home and we read them when they come back here. If you blow it out of the water, you come back as an honor grad, we produce awards for you. So the bottom line here is do the best you can when you go. It's going to be hard. We know it is, but everybody that's talking to you today has done it. All your R&R NCOs have done it. Hundreds of thousands of people have done it. So you absolutely can do it. All right. Don't let you limit you. All right. So go and do what you got to do. Come back here to Idaho because the Army Guard's the best guard. We're out.